Good morning, Harish. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time out, and I look forward to getting some insights from you and a lot of tips and tricks for people to see how they can pivot through the supply function, and then how the businesses can get benefited. So, very good morning to you.
Morning, Sangeeta, and thanks for having me over. It's a pleasure to interact with you on this through Zoom about your new book. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, if you're ready, we can get started.
Sure.
So for a business, what are some of the best negotiation strategies with suppliers while ensuring no compromise is there on quality? Because quality is important. At the same time, pricing is also the key. So what is the best way to negotiate with suppliers?
Yeah, so the negotiation actually depends on the type of supplier and what exactly they are supplying. Generally, if there is some technology involved in it and where there is some specific know-how or trade secret, then the approach that we would take is, trying to find at least 2 or 3 vendors and get comparative bids. And in addition to that, one important thing that of late, manufacturing companies have done is the zero-based costing. So, either through consultants or through in-house expertise, you do a zero-based costing on what we think the part should cost. So a combination of multiple quotations and using the zero-based costing, where we actually throw data to them and throw our data and then collect their data and see where the gap is. So that's usually a very effective negotiation strategy. Some of the less critical, when I say critical in terms of maybe technology, it's easily available, but still quality is very important. There we use, even e-sourcing, where we do the e-bidding, we call it reverse bidding, where we invite 3-4 suppliers who meet the quality requirements, and then we slot 1 hour. And within that 1 hour, we put our requirement online, and people can bid, and they will just see A, B, C, D. They won't know who the other vendors are, and it's called reverse bidding, so actually the price keeps going down. So we do that also for certain non-critical parts. I mean, so it depends, like fasteners. I mean, where quality is still important, but a fastener is very easily available versus something like a specific cold form forging or something like that. Then we use this zero-based costing and comparative bidding. And these are just some examples of what negotiation strategies we use.
The reverse bid sounds very interesting. So can the others know what their competitors are also bidding?
Yeah. So it'll be a live screen. So let's say there are 4 vendors. You will just see the name A, B, C, D, and you'll know you are B. So you'll put your price, but then you'll see A has undercut you, then C is undercutting you. So it's all live. It's a 1 hour. So it will start and get over in like 30 minutes or whatever. So you have to take that call at that time. So the winner is announced then and there. So yeah. So it works.
Sure, that sounds really very, very interesting. Okay. And I think since it's real time, then everybody gets to know the outcome as well.
Correct. It's a completely transparent process.
Right. Right.
And there are actually some very good companies that run it as well. In fact, there's a company called Ariba, which was subsequently bought by SAP. So it's now an SAP product. So SAP offers this through Ariba.
Okay.
1 or 2 more companies also that do this.
I see. Okay. Oh, very nice. Sure. All right. So the other thing I wanted to check is normally whatever is the input and then the process that you do to it results in the output. So output is dependent on whatever is the input. So for a business, how can they ensure that the quality of the input of, the quality of the raw materials is of really good quality so that their output is also equally good? And what measures can be taken? What, like maybe some best practices or something you could share?
Right. So, ultimately, the best way of ensuring quality is through ensuring that you have robust systems, both at the vendor's place and at, let's say if we were the buyer, at the buyer's place. So it's very important to ensure. So, we have an elaborate process before we onboard a vendor. We have on-site audits, and the audit would cut across everything, right from where material enters their factory, enters, comes into the factory, leaves the factory. So there is a very detailed checklist, right up to how the material flows, what machines it's loaded on, what is the maintenance practices being followed on those machines. So there is a very detailed checklist / audit that we do. So, and like in Rane, we have a separate department called STA, which is Supplier Technical Assistance. So their only job is to go to these vendors and ensure that they're capable of delivering the quality and in a consistent manner. Because oftentimes we find that we qualify a vendor, they enter the scene, and then 1 year down the line we have quality problems. So these people keep visiting them and ensuring we do repeat audits, etc. So one is to have an elaborate, a checklist based on which we do audits. Then and then at our side, once their material comes into our factories, then we have very rigorous inspections. And of course it depends on the vendor and their quality rating. Some could be a random check, some could be 100% check. And all this is done by, we have two departments. One, as I said, STA, whose job is to go to the vendors and ensure they follow systems and can deliver good parts. And then we have something called SQA, which is Supplier Quality Assurance, whose main job is to ensure that, once the part comes into our factory, the quality is good and it is validated for going into our production. So a lot of systems, is what ultimately ensures this. And of course, something will always slip in. There is always that bad part that will come in, but then the quick thing is, you have to figure out how it happened, where the slip in the system was, and then tighten the system. So that's how we operate.
These two functions sound very interesting. So how big is the team, and or what is a good proportion between the team and the vendors that they work with?
So, I mean, again, it's difficult to generalize. It would depend on the type of product. And I'll give you two examples. If you take Rane Madras, for example, where we make steering, we have a lot of suppliers. So we buy, there's like 60 parts that go into a steering. So there are therefore, probably 60 vendors supplying these parts. So some products like that, we have a very strong STA and SQA team. I mean, these people, for 1,000 crore company, we are talking of, having maybe 30 people doing just this job. But then if the product is something like an engine valve, let's say, the engine valve has only one material that we buy. Of course, these are very special alloy steels, but the material is only one. It's not like we're dependent on, 30, 40 suppliers. So therefore, the strength of the department would be much lower. So it also depends on the type of product.
Okay, sure, got it. Thank you. Right. So how can a business ensure that their supplies are on a timely manner and then the operations and the delivery are not impacted? Because end of the day, you are answerable to your customer, but you're also dependent on the supplier for it.
Correct. So, yeah. So again, one of the things that we do, I talked about this STA doing this audit. One important part is whenever we onboard a supplier for a particular business, and in the automotive business, for example, just to give you an example, like let's say Maruti Suzuki. So everyone starting with Maruti, they will tell you that Maruti Suzuki, this new model we are launching in 2021, and the volume is going to be 300,000 cars per year based on their market demand. They would have estimated. So therefore, this capacity has to get created for 300,000. And generally, what we will do is we will add like a 10% or a 15% buffer. So then this STA team, they will actually go to the supplier site and validate that they have that capacity, which means, if you divide 350,000 pieces per year, 320,000 pieces per annum, and let's say you're working 300 days in a year, you divide it by number of days, number of shifts. So which means ultimately you'll have to be able to do X pieces per hour. Right. So we go and do an audit, that this supplier is being consistently able to produce at X pieces per hour. So that is one way of ensuring that, our delivery is not impacted. The supplier actually has the capacity. Of course, then you can have other external influences. The transporter can go on a strike, or those kind of problems are there. So to overcome that, we usually have something called vendor managed inventory, VMI. We call it VMI, where close to our factory, we get them to rent a warehouse and usually keep 1 or 2 days of stock, so, and we keep monitoring the stock levels. They also keep monitoring the stock level to make sure, adequate supply is available. I mean, like in your grocery store, so we have one warehouse where 10 or 15 different suppliers will keep their parts, and then we will go and pick those parts on a daily basis. So we call this VMI. So that buffers against any sudden incident like a transporter strike happens. At least for 1 or 2 days, our factory will run. So we do that as well. So these are some of the things that we do.
Wow, nice. That sounds like a almost foolproof mechanism to work with.
Correct. Correct. I mean, and these are all. I mean, I must give credit to a lot of our customers, like whether it's a Maruti or a Ford or a Toyota. They ensure they do this with us, and we also do it with our vendors.
Right, right. Oh, that's nice, nice. So interesting. So is it also applicable for like really small, vendors like, or like a one-man show that who's into manufacturing some part that is required by you? You do it even for like really small?
Okay, yeah. So we don't. You're right. We don't do this with everyone. What we do is we categorize our suppliers as A, B, and C. So A is very highly critical, maybe high value also. So all the A category vendors, we generally push them towards having this VMI and holding inventory and all that. B also to some extent we push, or we will have carry some internal, we will increase our inventory internally. With C category, these could be some small parts that we generally carry the inventory inside.
Right. Okay. Nice. Okay. Sure. So, when you're saying when you have manufacturing specifically for, companies like Maruti or a Ford, whatever, they may have their specific designs, So, and these, to design their requirements, it could take some time. So what is a good way to shorten and create a process so that the time taken by the supplier to produce is at a minimum, and thereby your cycle gets faster?
Right. Yeah. So, the single most important thing to ensure, that we, as this design and specification is getting finalized and there is no delay, because once a date is set for a, Maruti Swift launch date, they don't change that. Usually they decide that 3 years ahead, So it's so critical that no deadlines are missed. So the single most important thing is what we call early engagement and concurrent engineering. So right when Maruti starts designing the next Swift, even though they haven't frozen the design, while they are still evolving the design, they start involving the vendors. So we start getting involved. And similarly, we involve especially our A category suppliers. We start involving them. Even though nothing is frozen, nothing is decided, we are still figuring out the design, but at least they know the thought process. So that early engagement is very, very important. And also something what we call concurrent engineering. So that way I can tell our vendor that, this is what broadly we're looking at. So then they start engineering based on that. And then at least 80% of the design is ready. And then the final 20 will get tweaked depending on what Maruti finally wants. That will then translate into what we finally want, which will then go into vendor. So we try to do that 80%, through this concurrent engineering and early involvement. And then the last 20%, we tweak it as the design gets frozen. So this is a very, important initiative to ensure we don't miss the, timelines. And then there is again a specific process also with our vendors, what we call APQP, advanced product and quality planning. So again, it's a system-based, checklist that we go through. So that again makes sure that, all the boxes are ticked in terms of what they need to take care of design, nothing is getting missed out. If they're doing this particular design, for that design, they need to have a particular gauge. So that gauge needs to get ordered on time. So this APQP checklist captures all of that. So we also get them to fill up that put the dates in, and then we review those dates and to see if everything is progressing. So this is another system that we use to ensure, there is no delays and we shorten the time.
Interesting. Right. So how to mitigate the risks associated with suppliers, especially, when you're dealing with exclusive product designs, or if there are any particular trade secrets, there are good chances that, it could get leaked out. I'm not saying all the time, but as a business, what would be your recommendation to protect these things?
I mean, so of course, obviously the first thing is, legally we ensure, we have very strong legal documents. We start off with an NDA, which clearly lays out what can and what cannot be disclosed, which is very binding in nature and for a long duration. Then, of course, then once after doing the NDA, the design is frozen, and once we nominate a vendor and give him or her the business, then we ensure there is a contract that again, ensures that there is no leakage. So largely it's through legal documentation, but I must tell you that a lot of it is also trust based, because see, in automotive, while we are a vast industry, there, at the end of the day, there are only few people for each type of part. You take a steering, there's probably 5 steering players in the world, So a brake, again, there's maybe 5 or 4 brake players in the world. So ultimately, if if some trade secret gets leaked, then that's it. You're never again going to get business with us. And so that damages your own business. So so it's in your interest to follow that moral code. So that check and balance is anyway there, but then that backed up with legal documentation is how we ensure.
So how can a business avoid and keep wastages to a minimum, and also how to handle non-moving stock?
Right. So again, this is a difficult one, because while we all try to minimize wastage, at the end of the day, there is wastage that happens. And sometimes it's not a small amount also. Sometimes it can even run into crores, because a lot of this to do is planning. Unless you do proper advanced planning in terms of quantity, requirements, and then transparently share that, and that is always a challenge in our industry, where between what the vehicle manufacturer is planning to produce to what a tier 1 like ourselves is planning to produce, and then our supplier, what we call tier 2. Because as inventory gets built through the system, so unless there is transparent sharing of the exact quantity and requirement, for example, last year we had a huge challenge where the entire industry moved from BS4 to BS6. So that time, that was a big engineering change for all the cars or trucks, and there was a lot of obsolescence, and so unless the customer could exactly predict what quantity they're going to produce, there was going to be wastage. So one is, transparency in planning is what I would say. I mean, the second, actually, what I would advise is, especially for businesses and where you're planning for a program, at the end of the day, there will be some wastage. So you're better off, factoring that in your costs. So, let's say a customer contract is for 100, and you're going to produce 110 or 105, there could be a 3-4% wastage. So it's better to plan that in your costs, because in case something untoward happens.
Right. And the non-moving stock?
Yeah, so I mean, the same thing. That's why I said that it's planning that 3-4% in your cost, so that even ultimately the non-moving stock, you have to write it off, and you'll have to sell it to some scrap for steel or plastic or whatever. So what I'm saying is, so you're not going to be able to realize the value. So therefore, plan that in your costing. And of course, as I said, through transparent sharing of plans, you try and minimize the non-moving stock, but very rarely it becomes a zero.
So do you follow like just-in-time inventory or something like that? Or
yeah, of course. So that we follow for our regular month-to-month production. See, when I talked about non-moving stock or dead inventory, that is at the end of the life of a program. For example, let's say Maruti Swift, they refresh the model every 3 or 4 years, right? So at the end of 4 years, you're left with dead inventory or not some non-moving stock. That's what I was talking about. But on a month-to-month basis, there is, through just-in-time, we ensure that there is very minimum inventory. So, but that will not become dead inventory. Worst case, what I'm not able to sell this month, I'll sell it next month. I would have only lost the working capital by holding excess inventory. So while that is still a financial loss, that doesn't hurt as much as being stuck with dead inventory.
Right. Oh, sure. Got it. Okay. So what do you think should a healthy supplier payment cycle look like? Because cash is, the thing, and businesses are pressed for cash. So what should be your cycle?
Yeah. So, in our industry, when you have big OEMs like Maruti or Mahindra or whoever, while we would love to have negative working capital, but that's rarely the case. Generally, in our industry, the payment terms are anywhere from 45 to 60 days. So we have a similar expectation from our supplier. About 45 to 60 days is the norm. And of course, the banking sector is also quite used to the automotive industry and the stability of the industry. So they generally give credit for that duration of time, and it's also backed up by inventory and all that. So, generally in our industry, we operate on a 45 to 60-day cycle, which is reasonably healthy. And of course, when I compare with certain other industry like electricity or something, people supplying to government, TNEB or whoever, I think our cycles are much better. And of course, we also of late, many of the banks also do factoring, so we use that extensively. While there is a 45 to 60-day credit period with the customers, using bill discounting and factoring, we are able to realize the payments even earlier.
Sure. So any advice for an MSME? Because I think according to the MSME Act, they need to get paid, I think, within 45 days or something like that. And I know a lot of MSMEs are struggling to get the payment done even within the 45 days. So any advice you would have for those people?
No, I mean, so there is a government requirement that all MSMEs have to be paid in 45 days. And someone like Rane, we strictly adhere to that. We will, in fact, we have a review mechanism to ensure that all the MSMEs, we keep monitoring and make sure their payments don't exceed the 45 days. Because if it is exceeded, A, of course, the MSME gets hurt, but B, we become liable and answerable to the government, because it's so. One is to ensure you have a system in place, and this is applicable even for MSMEs, because many times an MSME is buying parts from another MSME. So they also need to ensure that, so one is to ensure you have a robust system that all MSMEs are being paid in 45 days. And so you should have a good system in place, because there is a requirement by law.
Okay. Cool. Right. So there could be times that, there are differences of opinion with the suppliers, or, it could be poor quality, delayed delivery, or some disputes, whatever. So what is the best way to handle, and, should one take the legal route, and if yes, when?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, again, the supplier community, in our industry, again, is very partnership based. So, but at the same time, disputes will arise all the time. It could be due to a quality issue, it could be due to a warranty, or it could have been something that we had to air freight the parts, put it on a plane and send it. Sometimes the freight cost of the part by sending it on a plane is more expensive than the part cost. So many times these kind of disputes arise. So what generally happens is, case by case, these disputes are taken up, and negotiations happen, and usually there's a mutual amicable solution that is arrived at based on who is at fault, where the failure was, etc. So generally most disputes get all the commercial aspects get resolved through negotiation. And sometimes it also gets linked to future business. We tell them that, if you don't pay this, plane bill where we paid, 20 lakhs to ship parts on a plane, your future business will get impacted. So those kind of negotiations happen. Legal route is very rare, but it does happen. Generally, we take a legal route when we know there is no future with that supplier, and then that dispute can never be resolved through negotiations. Then it goes through the legal route. It happens very rarely. I mean, I would say in the last 10 years, maybe we have done it twice. Where we have taken legal action against a vendor.
Okay. Okay. Sure. What should be like an ideal size of a supplier, or do you have like a supplier base for each component or for each material? Because sometimes when you have too many also it's a problem, or if you're relying on too few also it's a problem. So what would be like an ideal?
Yeah, so again, it depends on as said, the type of part that you're buying and the technology that is involved. So if there is some technology, especially this A category suppliers, what we talked about, where there is some technology or some high value content in it, generally we would have 2 or 3 suppliers. Usually, in some cases, only 2 suppliers. So that we can split the risk. Now, as we go to a B or C category, then we can have multiple suppliers. But in C category, many times, because it is a commodity item, we may even have only 1 supplier, but our ability to switch is quite easy. So we can then quickly switch also. So, so it varies depending on the type of part. Of course, there are some parts where we become single source. So there could be some very unique technology that supplier brings. We don't have any other choice but to buy from that supplier. But if such a thing happens, usually within 2-3 years we will somehow develop an alternate supplier. So generally we try to have at least 2 suppliers.
Okay. Okay, so that you have somebody else to fall back on.
Correct. And you spread the risk. So.
Yes. So do you also like compare between the 2 suppliers, like say for pricing or the delivery schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. So once that happens, once we set up 2 suppliers, let's say, again, a common terminology in our industry, business between the 2 suppliers, and the share of business gets negotiated every year based on their price performance, delivery performance, quality performance. So generally, of course, generally if we have 2 suppliers, in most cases, one supplier would be 60%, the other would be 40%. And then we will play around with that, maybe 55-45, sometimes 50-50. So that decision gets taken based on what is the price, quality, and delivery performance, etc.
So do you also evaluate your suppliers periodically, or is it only?
Yes. As I said, that STA team, they do a quarterly audit, or so they do a detailed assessment using those formats. They assess every aspect of the supplier, including whether their factories are unionized, is the union stable, what is their financial rating. So all that we keep monitoring.
Fabulous. So how can a business handle price fluctuations from suppliers? Because it impacts your pricing as well, and also the forex we know keeps fluctuating a lot. So cases like that, how should a business handle it?
Right. Now, again, this is a difficult one. It also depends on what your buying power and selling power is. But from a fairness standpoint, what we try and do is where there is commodity fluctuation, like steel, iron, rubber, where there are indexed prices and the price keep moving every day, like forex. So these are all examples where commodities or forex, where we do an indexation. So on the day we settle the price, we index it to what the current value is. And then so during the quarter, it could go up or down. So at the end of every quarter, we do a price adjustment, whether it is Forex or some of these commodities for the next quarter.
Right.
So, so let's say we fix steel at 100, but during the quarter it slipped to 90. At the end of the quarter, if the price was 90, then we would adjust it to 90. And then for the next quarter, we would pay only 90.
Okay.
So, but if the next quarter from 90, if it went to 110, then the following quarter we would change it to 110. So there is a formula that we have. So this way it's transparent, and that way, right through the supply chain, the up or down movement gets adjusted every quarter. So the theory is that over a long term, neither party loses nor gains. But quarter to quarter, one party could gain and one party could lose. So this is followed by many of the OE vehicle manufacturers, and then therefore we also do the same thing.
Right. So
but there are certain cases where we don't. There the risk is completely on us. So then you start taking some hedging policies, some forward contracts, and things like that.
So if the adjustment, the fluctuation is favorable to you, is it passed on to the customer? I mean, vice versa, or if it is unfavorable,
Correct.
both ways?
Correct. Yeah. So wherever the contract is that you will pass it on every quarter, so then it gets passed on. But where contracts, where it is clearly says, there will be no Forex adjustment. So whether it is a loss or gain, the supplier gets to keep it.
Right. Sure. So would you like to share some tips or any pointers for businesses, especially like the MSME people, on how they can increase their profitability considering the current challenging times? Is there any advice that you would like to share there?
I mean, I always say that, especially in manufacturing, the money either gets made or lost in the plant. So having a very efficient operations is the most important. And in Rane we follow a lot of TQM systems, total quality management, to ensure we produce the right quality at the lowest cost, in the shortest lead time, with minimum wastage or no inefficiency. So therefore, running a very efficient factory and ensuring that you follow very good day-to-day management systems. We have this, thanks to TQM, we have elaborate what we call daily routine management, or DRM. So every day there is a morning sunrise meeting at 8 a.m. in the morning to see what was the production in the last 12 hours, what went right, what went wrong, which machine was not working the way it was supposed to, what needed to be done differently. So identifying and close management of all these variables in the plant is what ensures the success. So, and I would say for any MSME, from day one, when they start, you should ensure that you have these systems in place, because that is what will ensure long-term sustainability. Just getting an order and somehow making the order may see you through for a period of time. But then if something blows up on your face, whether it's a quality issue or delivery issue, then it can hurt you forever. So ensuring a good system is what I would say is the most essential.
That was very useful. So thank you so much, Harish. It was great to hear, your insights and wisdoms, and thanks a lot for sharing. It was great having you on the show, and I will, be featuring a lot of this in my book and catch up with you soon. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Sangeeta. I enjoyed it.